Faith of Our Fathers. On the streets of Hanoi, he found himself facing a legless peddler who rode a little wooden cart and called shrilly to every passer-by. Chen slowed, listened, but did not stop. Business at the Ministry of Cultural Artifacts cropped into his mind and deflected his attention. It was as if he were alone, and none of those on bicycles and scooters and jet-powered motorcycles remained. And likewise it was as if the legless peddler did not exist. "Comrade!" the peddler called, however, and pursued him on his cart. A helium battery operated the drive and sent the cart scuttling expertly after Chen. "I possess a wide spectrum of time-tested herbal remedies, complete with testimonials from thousands of loyal users. Advise me of your malady, and I can assist." Chen, pausing, said, "Yes, but I have no malady, except," he thought, "for the chronic one of those employed by the Central Committee, that of career opportunism, testing constantly the gates of each official position, including mine." "I can cure, for example, radiation sickness," the peddler chanted, still pursuing him, "or expand, if necessary, the element of sexual prowess. I can reverse carcinomatous progressions, even the dreaded melanomae, which you would call black cancers." Lifting a tray of bottles, small aluminum cans, and assorted powders in plastic jars, the peddler sang, "If a rival persists in trying to usurp your grateful bureaucratic position, I can purvey an ointment which, appearing as a dermal balm, is actually a desperately effective toxin. And my prices, comrade, are low. And as a special favor to one so distinguished and bearing as yourself, I will accept the post-war inflationary paper dollars reputed of international exchange, but in reality damn near no better than bathroom tissue." "Go to hell," Chen said, and signaled a passing hover car taxi. He was already 3½ minutes late for his first appointment of the day, and his various fat-ass superiors at the ministry would be making quick mental notations, as would, to an even greater degree, his subordinates. The peddler said quietly, "But, comrade, you must buy from me." "Why?" Chen demanded, indignation. "Because, comrade, I am a war veteran. I fought in the colossal final war of national liberation with the People's Democratic United Front against the imperialists. I lost my pedal extremities at the Battle of San Francisco." His tone was triumphant now, and sly. "It is the law. If you refuse to buy wares offered by a veteran, you risk a fine and possible jail sentence, and, in addition, disgrace." Warily, Chen nodded the hovercab on. Admittedly, he said, "Okay, I must buy from you." He glanced summarily over the meager display of herbal remedies, seeking one at random. "That," he decided, pointing to a paper-wrapped parcel in the rear row. Federer laughed. "That, comrade, is a spermatocide bought by women who, for political reasons, cannot qualify for the pill. It would be shallow use to you, in fact none at all, since you are a gentleman." "The law," Chen said bitterly, "does not require me to purchase anything useful from you, only that I purchase something. I'll take that." He reached into his pocket-coat for his billfold, huge with post-war inflationary bills in which 4 times a week he, as a government servant, was paid. "Tell me your problems," the peddler said. Chen stared at him, appalled by the invasion of privacy. And done by someone outside the government. "All right, comrade," the peddler said, seeing his expression. "I will not probe, excuse me, but as a doctor and herbal healer, it is fitting that I know as much as possible." He pondered, his gaunt features somber. "Do you watch television unusually much?" he asked abruptly. Taken by surprise, Chen said, "Every evening, except on Friday, when I go to my club to practice the esoteric imported art from the defeated West of steer roping." It was his only indulgence, other than that he had totally devoted himself to party activities. The peddler reached, selected a gray paper packet. 60 trade dollars, he stated, with the full guarantee. If it does not do as promised, return the unused portion for a full and cheery refund. "And what," Chen said cuttingly, "is it guaranteed to do?" "It will rest eyes fatigued by the continence of meaningless office monologues," the peddler said. "A soothing preparation. Take it as soon as you find yourself exposed to the usual dry and lengthy sermons which—" Chen paid the money, accepted the packet, and strode off. "Balls," he said to himself. It's a racket, he decided. The ordnance setting up war vets as a privileged class. They prey off of us, we, the younger ones, like raptors. Forgotten, the gray packet remained deposited in his coat pocket as he entered the imposing post-war Ministry of Cultural Artifacts building and his own considerable stately office to begin his workday. A portly middle-aged Caucasian male wearing a brown Hong Kong silk suit double-breasted with vest waited in his office. With the unfamiliar Caucasian stood his own immediate supervisor, Suma Zopin. Zopin introduced the two of them in Cantonese, dialect which he used badly. Mr. Tung Chen, this is Mr. Darius Pethel. Mr. Pethel will be headmaster at the new ideological and cultural establishment of didactic character soon to open at San Fernando, California, he added. Mr. Pethel has had a rich and full lifetime supporting the people's struggle to unseat imperialist bloc countries via pedagogic media, therefore his high post. They shook hands. Tea? Chen asked the two of them. He pressed the switch of his infrared hibachi, and in an instant the water in the highly ornamented ceramic pot of Japanese origin began to burble. As he seated himself at his desk, he saw that trustworthy Miss Shi had laid out the information poop sheet, confidential, on Comrade Pethel. He glanced over it, meanwhile pretending to be doing nothing in particular. The absolute benefactor of the people, Zopin said, has personally met Mr. Pethel and trusts him. This is rare. The school in San Fernando will appear to teach run-of-the-mill Taoist philosophies, but will, of course, in actuality maintain for us a channel of communication to the liberal and intellectual youth segment of western U.S. There are many of them still alive, from San Diego to Sacramento. We estimate at least 10,000. The school will accept 2,000. Enrollment will be mandatory for those who we select. Your relationship to Mr. Pethel's program is grave. Your tea water is boiling. Thank you, Chen murmured, dropping in the bag of Lipton's tea. Zopin continued, although Mr. Pethel will supervise the setting up of the courses of instruction presented by the school to its student body, all examination papers will, oddly enough, be relayed here to your office for your own expert, careful, ideological study. In other words, Mr. Chen, you will determine who among the 2,000 students is reliable, who is truly responding to the programming, and who is not. Oh, now pour my tea, Chen said, doing so ceremoniously. What we have to realize, Pethel rumbled in Cantonese, even worse than that of Zopin, is that once having lost the global war to us, the American youth has developed a talent for dissembling. He spoke the last word in English, not understanding it. Chen turned inquiringly to his superior. Lying, Zopin explained. Pethel said, mouthing the proper slogans for surface appearance, but on the inside believing them false. Test papers by this group will closely resemble those of genuine. You mean that the test papers of 2,000 students will be passing through my office? Chen demanded. How he could not believe it. It's a full-time job in itself. I don't have time for anything remotely resembling that. He was appalled. To give critical official approval or denial of the astute variety which you're envisioning? He gestured. Screw that, he said in English, blinking at the strong Western vulgarity. Zopin said, you have a staff, plus you can requisition several more from the pool. The ministry's budget, augmented this year, will permit it. And remember, the absolute benefactor of the people has hand-picked Mr. Pethel. His tone now had become ominous, but only subtly so, just enough to penetrate Chen's hysteria, and to wither it into submission, at least temporarily. To underline his point, Zopin walked to the far end of the office. He stood before the full-length 3D portrait of the absolute benefactor, and after an interval his proximity triggered the tape transport mounted behind the portrait. The face of the benefactor moved, and from it came familiar homely, in more than familiar accents. Fight for peace, my sons, it intoned gently, firmly. Ah, Chen said, still perturbed, but concealing it. Possibly one of the ministry's computers could sort the examination papers. A yes-no maybe structure could be employed in conjunction with a pre-analysis of the pattern of ideological correctness and incorrectness. The matter could be made routine, probably. Darius Pethel said, I have with me certain material which I would like you to scrutinize, Mr. Chen. He unzipped an unsightly, old-fashioned plastic briefcase. 2 examination essays, he said as he passed the documents to Chen. This will tell us if you're qualified. He then glanced at Sopin. Their gazes met. I understand, Pethel said, that if you are successful in this venture, you will be made vice chancellor of the ministry, and His Greatness, the absolute benefactor of the people, will personally confer Kisturgian's medal on you. Both he and Sopin smiled in wary unison. This Kisturgian medal, Chen echoed. He accepted the examination papers, glanced over them in a show of leisurely indifference, but within his heart vibrated all ill-concealed tension. Why these two? By that I mean, what am I looking for, sir? One of them, Pethel said, is the work of a dedicated progressive, a loyal party member, of thoroughly researched conviction. The other is by a young Stilyagi, whom we suspect of holding petit bourgeois, imperialist, degenerate crypto ideas. It is up to you, sir, to determine which is which. Thanks a lot, Chen said, but nodding, he read the title of the top paper. Doctrines of the Absolute Benefactor anticipated in the poetry of Baha'u'ddin Zuhara of 13th century Arabia. Glancing down the initial pages of the essay, Chen saw a quatrain familiar to him. It was called Death, and he had known it most of his adult educated life. Once he will miss, twice he will miss. He only chooses one of many hours. For him nor deep nor hill there is, but all's one level plain. He hunts for flowers. Powerful, Chen said, this poem. He makes use of the poem, Bethel said, observing Chen's lip moving as he reread the quatrain, to indicate the age-old wisdom displayed by the absolute benefactor in our current lives, that no individual is safe, everyone is mortal, and only the supra-personal, historically essential cause survives, as it should be. Would you agree with him? With this student? Or Pethel paused. Is he in fact perhaps satirizing the absolute benefactor's promulgations? Cagily, Chen said, give me a chance to inspect the other paper. You need no further information. Decide. Haltingly, Chen said, I had never thought of this poem that way. He felt irritable. Anyhow, it isn't a Baha'u'ddin Zuhari, it's part of 1001 Nights anthology. It is, however, 13th century. I admit that. He quickly read over the text of the paper accompanying the poem. It appeared to be routine, uninspired rehash of party cliches, all of them familiar to him from birth. The blind, imperialist monster who moved down and snuffed out, mixed metaphor, human aspiration, the calculations of the still extant anti-party group in eastern United States. He felt dully bored and as uninspired as the student's paper. We must preserve, the paper declared. Wipe out the Pentagon remnants in the Catskills, subdue Tennessee, and most especially the pocket of die-hard reaction in the Red Hills of Oklahoma. He sighed. I think, Sopin said, we would allow Mr. Chen the opportunity of observing this difficult matter at his leisure. To Chen, he said, you have permission to take them home to your condominium this evening and judge them on your own time. He bowed half mockingly, half solicitously. In any case, insult or not, he had gotten Chen off the hook, and for that Chen was grateful. You are most kind, he murmured, to allow me to perform this new and highly stimulating labor on my own time. Mikoyan, were he alive today, would approve. You bastard, he said to himself, meaning both his superior and the Caucasian Pethel, handing me a hot potato like this on my own time. Obviously, the CP-USA is in trouble. Its indoctrination academies aren't managing to do their job, and the notoriously Polish eccentric Yank youths. And you've passed that hot potato on and on until it reaches me. Thanks for nothing, he thought acidly. That evening, in his small but well-appointed condominium apartment, he read over the other of the 2 examination papers, this one by Marion Culper, and discovered that 2 dealt with poetry. Obviously, this was speciously a poetry class, and he felt ill. It had always run against his grain, the use of poetry, of any art, for social purposes. Anyhow, comfortable in his special spine-straightening, simulated leather easy chair, he lit a Quaison Ray No. 1 English Market Immense Corona cigar and began to read. The writer of the paper, Miss Culper, had selected as her text a portion of a poem of John Dryden, 17th-century English poet, final lines from the well-known A Song for St. Cecilia's Day. So when the last and dreadful hour, rumbling pageant shall devour, the trumpet shall be heard on high, the dead shall live, the living die, and music shall untune the sky. What's a hell of a thing, Chen thought to himself bitingly. Dryden, we're supposed to believe, anticipated the fall of capitalism. That's what he meant by the crumbling pageant. Christ. He leaned over to take hold of the cigar and found that it had gone out. Groping in his pockets for his Japanese-made lighter, he half rose to his feet. Twee! The TV set at the far end of the living room said. Aha, Chen thought. We're about to be addressed by the leader. By the absolute benefactor of the people. Up there in Peking. Where he's lived for 90 years now. Or is it 100? Or, as we sometimes like to think of him, the ass. May the 10,000 blossoms of abject, self-assumed poverty flower in your spiritual courtyard, the TV announcer said with a groan. Chen rose to his feet, bowed the mandatory bow of response. Each TV set came equipped with monitoring devices to narrate to the SecPol, the security police, whether its owner was bowing and or watching. On the screen, a clearly defined visage manifested itself. The wide, unlined, healthy features of the 120-year-old leader of CP East, ruler of many, far too many, Chen reflected. Blah to you, he thought, and reseated himself in his simulated leather easy chair, now facing the TV screen. My thoughts, the absolute benefactor said, in his rich and slow tones, are on you, my children, and especially on Mr. Tong Chen of Hanoi, who faces a difficult task ahead, a task to enrich the people of democratic East, plus the American West Coast. We must think in unison about this noble, dedicated man and the chore which he faces, and I have chosen to take several moments of my time to honor him and encourage him. Are you listening, Mr. Chen? Yes, Your Greatness, Chen said, and pondered to himself the odds against the party leader singling him out this particular evening. The odds caused him to feel uncomradely cynicism. It was unconvincing. Probably this transmission was being beamed into his apartment building alone, or at least to this city. It might also be a nip-cinch job done at Hanoi TV Incorporated. In any case, he was required to listen and watch and absorb. He did so from a lifetime of practice. Outwardly, he appeared to be rigidly attentive. Inwardly, he was still mulling over the two test papers, wondering which was which. Where did devout party enthusiasm end and sardonic lampoonery begin? Hard to say, which of course explained why they had dumped the task in his lap. Again he groped in his pockets for his lighter, and found the small gray envelope which the war veteran peddler had sold him. God, he thought, remembering what it had cost. Money down the drain, and what did this herbal remedy do? Nothing. He turned the packet over and saw on the back small printed words. Well, he thought, and began to unfold the packet with care. The words had snared him. Of course they were meant to do. Failing as a party member and human? Afraid of becoming obsolete and discarded on the ash heap of history by... He read rapidly through the text, ignoring its claims, seeking to find out what he had purchased. Meanwhile, the absolute benefactor droned on. Snuff. The package contained snuff, countless tiny black grains, like gunpowder, which sent up an interesting aromatic to tickle his nose. The title of the particular blend was Prince's Special, he discovered, and very pleasing, he decided. At one time he had taken snuff, smoking tobacco, for a time having been illegal for reasons of health back during his student days at Peking U. It had been the fad, especially the amatory mixes prepared in Chongqing, made from God knew what. Was this that? Almost any aromatic could be added to snuff, from essence of organ to pulverize baby crab, or so some seemed, especially an English mixture called high dried toast, which had itself more or less put an end to his yearning for nasal inhaled tobacco. On the TV screen, the absolute benefactor rumbled monotonously on as Chen sniffed cautiously at the powder, read the claims. It cured everything from being late to work to falling in love with a woman of dubious political background. Interesting, but typical of claims. His doorbell rang. Rising, he walked to the door, opened it with full knowledge of what he would find. There, sure enough, stood Mo Kuei, the building warden, small and hard-eyed and alert to his task. He had his armband and metal helmet on, showing that he meant business. "Mr. Chen, comrade party worker, I received a call from the television authority. You are failing to watch your television screen and are instead fiddling with a packet of doubtful content." He produced a clipboard and ballpoint pen. "Two red marks, and hither to now you are similarly ordered to repose yourself in a comfortable, stress-free posture before your screen and give the leader your unexcelled attention. His words, this evening, are directed particularly to you, sir. To you." "I doubt that," Chen heard himself say. Blinking, Kuei said, "What do you mean?" "The leader rules 8 billion comrades. He isn't going to single me out." He felt wrathful. Punctuality of the warden's reprimand irked him. Kuei said, "But I distinctly heard with my own ears. You were mentioned." Going over to the TV set, Chen turned the volume up. "But now he's talking about failures in People's India. That's of no relevance to me. Whatever the leader expostulates is relevant." Mo Kuei scratched a mark on his clipboard sheet, bowed formally, turned away. "My call to come up here to confront you with your slackness originated at Central. Obviously they regard your tension as important. I must order you to set in motion your automatic transmission recording circuit and replay the earlier portions of the leader's speech." Chen farted and shut the door. Back to the TV set, he said to himself, "Where our leisure hours are spent." And there lay the 2 student examination papers. He had that weighing him down, too. And all on my own time, he thought savagely. The hell with them. Up theirs. He strode to the TV set, started to shut it off. At once, a red warning light winked on, informing him that he did not have permission to shut off the set. Could not, in fact, end its tirade and imagine even if he unplugged it. Mandatory speeches, he thought, will kill us all, bury us. If I could be free of the noise of speeches, free of the din of the party baying as it hounds mankind. There was no known ordinance, however, preventing him from taking snuff while he watched the leader. So opening the small gray packet, he shook out a mound of the black granules onto the back of his left hand. He then professionally raised his hand to his nostrils and deeply inhaled, drawing the snuff well up into his sinus cavities. Imagine the old superstition, he thought to himself, that the sinus cavities are connected to the brain, and hence an inhalation of snuff directly affects the cerebral cortex. He smiled, seating himself once more, fixed his gaze on the TV screen, and the gesticulating individual known to so utterly to them all. The face dwindled away, disappeared. The sound ceased. He faced an emptiness, a vacuum. The screen, white and black, confronted him, and from the speaker a faint hiss sounded. "The frigging snuff," he said to himself, and inhaled greedily at the remainder of the powder on his hand, drawing it avidly into his nose, his sinuses, and, or so it felt, into his brain. He plunged into the snuff, absorbing it elatedly. The screen remained black, and then by degrees an image once more formed and established itself. It was not the leader, not the absolute benefactor of the people, in point of fact, not a human figure at all. He faced a dead mechanical construct made of solid-state circuits, of swiveling pseudopodia, lenses, and a squawk box, and the box began, in a droning din, to harangue him. Staring fixedly, he thought, "What is this? Reality? Hallucination?" He thought. The peddler came across some of the psychedelic drugs used during the War of Liberation. He's selling this stuff, and I've taken some. Taken a whole lot. Making his way unsteadily to the vidphone, he dialed the SecPol station nearest his building. "I wish to report a pusher of hallucinogenic drugs," he said into the receiver. "Your name, sir, and kidnapped location?" Efficient, brisk, and impersonal bureaucrat of the police. He gave them the information, then haltingly made it back to his simulated leather easy chair, once again to witness the apparition on the TV screen. This is lethal, he said to himself. It must be some preparation developed in Washington, D.C. or London, stronger and stranger than LSD-25, which they dumped so effectively into our reservoirs. And I thought it was going to relieve me of the burden of the leader's speeches. This is far worse. This electronic, sputtering, swiveling metal and plastic monstrosity yammering away. This is terrifying. To have to face this the remainder of my life. It took 10 minutes for the Secpool two-man team to come rapping at his door, and by then, in a deteriorating set of stages, the familiar image of the leader had seeped back into focus on the screen, had supplanted the horrible artificial construct which waved its podia and squalled on and on. He let the two cops in shakily, led them to the table on which he had left the remains of the snuff in its packet. Psychedelic toxin, he said thickly, of short duration, absorbed into the bloodstream directly through nasal capillaries. I'll give you details as to where I got it, from whom, all that. He took a deeply shaky breath. The presence of the police was comforting. Ballpoint pens ready, the two officers waited, and all the time, in the background, the leader rattled out his endless speech, as he had done 1,000 evenings before in the life of Tung Chen. But he thought, It'll never be the same again. At least not for me. Not after inhaling that near-toxic snuff. He wondered, is that what they intended? It seemed odd to him, thinking of a they. Peculiar, but somehow correct. For an instant he hesitated, to giving out the details, not telling the police enough to find the man. The peddler, he started to say, I don't know where, can't remember, but he did. He remembered the exact street intersection, so with unexplainable reluctance he told them, Thank you, Comrade Chen. The boss of the team of the police carefully gathered up the remaining snuff, most of it remained, and placed it in his smart, sharp uniform pocket. We'll have it analyzed at the first available moment, the cop said, and inform you immediately in case counter-medical measures are indicated for you. Some of the old wartime psychedelics were eventually fatal, as you have no doubt read. I've read, he agreed, that they had been specifically what he had been thinking. Good luck, and thanks for notifying us, both cops said. He departed. The affair, for all their efficiency, did not seem to shake them. Obviously, such a complaint was routine. The lab report came swiftly, surprisingly so, in view of the vast state bureaucracy. It reached him by vidphone before the leader had finished his speech. It's not a hallucinogen, the Secpool lab technician informed him. No, he said, puzzled and strangely not relieved. Not at all. On the contrary, it's phenothiazine, which, as you doubtless know, is anti-hallucinogenic. A strong dose per gram of a mixture, but harmless. Might lower your blood pressure or make you sleepy. Probably stolen from a wartime cache of medical supplies, left by the retreating barbarians. I wouldn't worry. Pondering, Chen hung up the phone in slow motion, and then walked to the window of his canapé. The window with the fine view of other Hanoi high-rise canapés. To think. The doorbell rang. Feeling as if he were in a trance, he crossed the carpeted living room to answer it. The girl standing there in a tan raincoat with a babushka over her dark, shiny, and very long hair, said in a timid little voice, Comrade Chen? Tung Chen? Of the Ministry of... He let her in, reflexively, and shut the door after her. You've been monitoring my vidphone, he told her. It was a shot in darkness, but something in him, an unvoiced certitude, told him that she had. Did they take the rest of the snuff? She glanced about. Oh, I hope not. It's so hard to get these days. Snuff, he said, is easy to get. Phenothiazine isn't. Is that what you mean? The girl raised her head, studied him with large, moon-darkened eyes. Yes, Mr. Chen. She hesitated, obviously as uncertain as the Secpool cops had been assured. Tell me what you saw. It's of great importance for us to be certain. I had a choice, he said acutely. Yes, very much so. That's what confuses us. That's what is not as we planned. We don't understand it. If it's nobody's theory. Her eyes even darker and deeper, she said. Was it the aquatic horror shape? The thing with slime and teeth? The extraterrestrial life form? Please tell me. We have to know. She breathed irregularly with effort, the tan raincoat rising and falling. He found himself watching its rhythm. A machine, he said. Oh, she ducked her head, nodding vigorously. Yes, I understand. A mechanical organism in no way resembling a human. Not a simulacrum. or something constructed to resemble a man. He said, "This did not look like a man," he added to himself, and it failed. Did not try to talk like a man. You understand that it was not a hallucination. I've been officially told that what I took was a phenothiazine. That's all I know. He said as little as possible. He did not want to talk, but to hear what the girl had to say. Well, Mr. Chen, she took a deep, unstable breath. If it was not a hallucination, then what was it? What does that leave? What is called extra consciousness? Could that be it? He did not answer. Turning his back, he leisurely picked up the two students' test papers, glanced over them, ignoring her, waiting for her next attempt. At his shoulder she appeared, smelling of spring rain, smelling of sweetness and agitation, beautiful in the way she smelled and looked, and, he thought, speaks. So different from the harsh plateau speech patterns we hear on the TV, have heard since I was a baby. Some of them, she said huskily, we take the stelazine. It was stelazine you got, Mr. Chen. See one apparition, some another. But distinct categories have emerged. There is not an infinite variety. Some see what you saw, we call it the clanker. Some the aquatic horror, that's the gulper. And then there's the bird, the climbing tube, and she broke off. But other reactions tell you very little. Tell us very little? She hesitated, then plunged on. Tell us very little. She hesitated, then plunged on. Now that this has happened to you, Mr. Chen, we would like you to join our gathering, join your particular group. Those who see what you see. Group Red. We want to know what it really is. And she gestured with tapered, wax-smooth fingers. It can't be all those manifestations. Her tone was poignant, naively so. He felt his caution relax, a trifle. He said, "What do you see, you in particular? I'm part of Group Yellow. I see a storm, a whining, vicious whirlwind that roots everything up, crushes condominium apartments built to last a century." She smiled wanly. "The Crusher. 12 groups in all, Mr. Chen. 12 absolutely different experiments, all from the same phenothiazines, all of the leader as he speaks over TV, as it speaks, rather." She smiled up at him, lashes long, probably protracted artificially, and gaze engaging, even trusting, as if she thought he knew something or could do something. "I should make a citizen's arrest of you," he said presently. "There is no law, not about this. We studied Soviet judicial writings before we found people to distribute the stelazine. We don't have much of it. We have to be very careful whom we give it to. It seemed to us that you constituted a likely choice, a well-known post-war dedicated young career man on his way up." From his fingers she took the examination papers. "We're having you poll read," she asked. Poll read? He did not know the term. Study something said or written to see if it fits the party's current worldview. You in the hierarchy merely call it read, don't you? Again she smiled. "When you rise one step higher with Mr. Sopin, you will know that expression," she added somberly, "and with Mr. Pethel. He's very far up, Mr. Chen. There is no ideological school in San Fernando. These are forged exam papers, designed to read back to them a thorough analysis of your political ideology. And have you been able to distinguish which paper is orthodox and which is heretical?" Her voice was pixie-like, taunting with amused malice. "Choosing the wrong one, and your budding career stops dead cold in its tracks. Choose the proper one." "Do you know which is which?" he demanded. "Yes," she nodded soberly. "We have listening devices in Mr. Sopin's inner offices. We monitored his conversation with Mr. Pethel, who is not Mr. Pethel, but the higher Sekpol Inspector Judd Crane. You have probably heard mention of him. He acts as chief assistant to Judge Vorlowski at the '98 war crimes trial in Zurich." With difficulty he said, "Ah, I see. Well, that explained that." The girl said, "My name is Tanya Lee." He said nothing. He merely nodded, too stunned for any celebration. "Technically, I am a minor clerk," Miss Lee said, "at your ministry. You have never run into me. However, I can call at least recall that I can call or at least recall. We try to hold posts wherever we can, as far up as possible. My own boss. Should you be telling me this?" He gestured at the TV set, which remained on. "Aren't they picking this up?" Tanya Lee said, "We introduced a noise factor in the reception of both vid and the material from this apartment building. It will take them almost an hour to locate the sheathing. So we have. She examined the tiny wristwatch on her slender wrist. 15 more minutes, and still be safe. Tell me, he said, which paper is orthodox? Is that what you care about, really? What, he said, should I care about? Don't you see, Mr. Chen? You've learned something. The leader is not the leader. He is something else. But we can't tell what. Not yet, Mr. Chen. With all due respect. Have you ever had your drinking water analyzed? I know it sounds paranoid, but have you? No, he said, of course not. Knowing what she was going to say, Mrs. Lee said briskly, our tests show that it's saturated with hallucinogens. It is, has been, will continue to be. Not the ones used during the war, not the disorienting ones, but a synthetic quasi-ergot derivation called Dotrox 3. You drink it here in the building from the time you get up. You drink it in restaurants and other apartments that you visit. You drink it at the ministry. It's all piped from central common source. Her tone was bleak and ferocious. We solved that problem. We knew, as soon as we discovered it, that any good phenothiazine would counter it. What we did not know, of course, was this a variety of authentic experiences that makes no sense rationally. It's the hallucination which should differ from person to person, and the reality experience which should be ubiquitous. It's all turned around. We can't even construct an ad hoc theory which accounts for that, and God knows we've tried. 12 mutually exclusive hallucinations that would be easily understood, but not one hallucination and 12 realities. She ceased talking then and studied the two test papers, her forehead wrinkling. The one with the Arabic poem is orthodox, she stated. If you tell them that, they'll trust you and give you a higher post. You'll be another notch up in the hierarchy of party officialdom. Smiling, her teeth were perfect and lovely, she finished. Look what you received back for your investment this morning. Your career is underwritten for a time, and by us. He said, I don't believe you. Instinctively, his caution operated within him. Always the caution of a lifetime lived among the hatchet men of the Hanoi branch of the CP East. They knew an infinitude of ways by which to axe a rival out of contention, some of which he himself had employed, some of which he had seen done to himself and to others. This could be a novel way, one unfamiliar to him. It could always be. Tonight, Miss Lee said, in the speech, the leader singled you out. Didn't this strike you as strange? You, of all people, a minor office holder in a meager ministry? Admitted, he said. It struck me that way, yes. That was legitimate. His greatness is grooming an elite cadre of younger men, post-war men, he hopes will infuse new life into the hidebound, moribund hierarchy of old fogies and party hacks. His greatness singled you out for the same reason that we singled you out. If pursued properly, your career could lead you all the way to the top, at least for a time, as we know. That's how it goes. He thought, so virtually everyone has faith in me, except myself, and certainly not after this. The experience with the anti-hallucinatory snuff, it had shaken years of confidence, and no doubt rightly so. However, he was beginning to regain his poise. He felt it seeping back, a little at first, then with a rush. Going to the vidphone, he lifted the receiver and began, for the second time that night, to dial the number of the Hanoi Security Police. Turning me in, Miss Lee said, would be the second most regressive decision you can make. I'll tell them that you brought me here to bribe me. You thought